If I took a poll asking people, hey everyone, do you all want to go back to 2020 for 2.5 hours? What do you think the response would be? A year that legitimately gave people PTSD in so many different ways. A year where so many of our problems stem from how things just went off the wall. A pandemic, a messy election, mental health, police brutality, protests, goddamn murder hornets. It was quite the tough year for everyone. So why the hell does Ari Aster want to go back? I would have never guessed after watching the back-to-back of Hereditary and Midsummer that Ari Aster's career would go here. And I think he might be the greatest modern case of a blank check. Hereditary was such a big hit for A24, especially at that time, and then followed it up with Midsummer. A24 just went, okay, you know what, whatever you want to do, you got it. He made Beau is Afraid, which bombed, and while I find parts of that movie fascinating, I definitely understand why it bombed. So the fact that A24 went, oh, you want to do some satire on 2020? Yeah, here's a check, run it up, go for it. But here we are with Eddington. It follows a sheriff, Joe Cross, who decides to run for mayor against Ted Garcia in 2020 as the real-life events of that year begin to unfold, causing chaos in their town. Is this movie good? What does it actually mean? Did we need this? I don't know. We are on his fourth feature film now, and we are still asking the question, is Ari Aster okay? You know, a lot of times people say, oh, blank movie is divisive, and it'll be like, yeah, some people love it, some people hate it, blah, 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 and it's not that big a deal. When I say this movie will be divisive, oh my god, I genuinely believe this movie will inspire some of the most wild takes we have ever seen. Some people believe this is an accurate depiction of the United States in the year 2020, which led to a downward spiral and led us to where we are now, where nothing makes sense anymore and everyone's angry. While others believe it is not only a lazy movie, but a morally reprehensible movie, an irresponsible movie, and uses real-life tragic events of 2020 to make an entertainment product. Which side will you fall on? That is the question. Now, as people know, I have absolutely no problem ripping a movie if I feel that strongly about it, nor do I have a problem praising a movie even if it is deemed a little divisive and people don't like it. I have no problem with that. But truthfully, this movie took me on such a ride through the spectrum of loving it and hating it that by the time it ended, it kind of balanced out in the middle. So allow me this time to kind of talk it out here with you all. I am not and haven't been a person who is against a movie being set in 2020. Even with that year being the worst, I don't mind it. Some people think it's just too soon or just simply hate the idea of being in a movie with 2020 just in your face. If I think someone has a story to tell, I would like to see that story. And in what is as subtle a metaphor as getting absolutely rocked in the face, Ari Aster certainly seems to remember 2020 pretty well. The air of paranoia, the confusion, the stress, that almost heart-stopping moment when you would hear someone cough in the store and it's like the whole world stops and looks at that person. And in the beginning of this movie, it does feel like an apt satire on the sheer ridiculousness of 2020 looking back years removed. And again, your mileage will vary. I don't think it's wrong to look back on how like society was at 2020 and kind of laugh at it and the behaviors of everyone, including from myself. I think it's okay to kind of chuckle at the idea of like, can I get COVID from an Amazon package or not? But if someone wants to make a satire on it, that's fine. They want to talk about the masks and the social distancing and how crazy everyone was. Okay, go for it. And I personally don't think Ari Aster is like trying to make fun of people who didn't have a lot of information and were just trying to be safe with masks and everything. Nor do I think he's really trying to ostracize people who did genuinely feel uncomfortable with the thought of a mask and lockdown. I think he just wanted to point out how quickly and divided America became in such a short amount of time. And a good satire to me, especially in dealing with such charged subjects as this, is it has to go somewhat to the edge of the line. I don't know if it's possible to do a satire on 2020 and not push the envelope at least a little bit. What's the point of being safe with something like this? Because if it was just a movie on like, haha, look how crazy America got over masks, then it's like, what? And this is where people will either get on board or completely outright reject this movie. Because while I did find the beginning of this movie quite funny, in real life, the events of 2020 eventually starts to make its way into a narrative of Eddington. More strict enforcements of pandemic protocols, George Floyd, protests, Black Lives Matter, white savior liberalism, virtue signaling, social media. Quite frankly, I'm surprised at how much stuff they put in this movie. So it definitely takes a lot of inspiration from those real life events and puts it in this movie, which is quite a bold choice. It certainly swings for it. and not everything works. In particular, I think Emma Stone and Austin Butler's characters are just completely underserved. I get they're there to illustrate a certain point, but it really never amounts to much. So some people will look at these depictions of real life, oftentimes tragic events that happened in 2020, and they'll see it in this movie, and they'll see it as a gross misrepresentation of what really happened, and I understand that interpretation for sure. No spoilers, I promise, but there's a white girl in the movie, and I say white just because it is an important part of her character, but she is so incredibly passionate about BLM and racism and protesting and all that. She is the type to constantly say without provocation that she is anti-racist, and is the type to kneel on the ground for certain times. And at first I'm like, okay, so Ari Aster, among many things, is kind of poking fun at this type of activist. But then as the movie progresses, her character seems to get a little more sincere, and I'm like, okay, so he's not mocking them at all. So then how does he view this character? There's another kid who has a crush on that white girl and just pretends to get into these social issues just to get closer to her, pretending he cares about BLM or pretending he cares that he's on stolen land. And his arc by the end is a solid reflection of social media, how it can propel people up into what they believe or what they say they believe. I guess what I'm trying to say is Ari Aster kept pulling the rug out from under me, and that might not work for you. Quite frankly, I don't know if it worked for me. Characters that you think he's making fun of seem to get more sincere as the movie goes on. The so-called good guys of the movies, turns out they're actually not very good at all and still have their own selfish interests. What starts as a satire poking fun at America in 2020 soon ends in a brutal shootout. And all of that is to say, it is the most literal metaphor of America in 2020 and the anxieties that year produced for us, and how we have gotten to where we are now. And I don't know how I'm making this movie sound. I feel like I'm making it sound a little bit more successful than I actually feel, because even with all that I'm saying, I'm kind of thinking in my head like, okay, so what's the point? So what are you trying to say? You know the movie Civil War that came out where it kind of refused to take sides on an issues, and to some people they're like, yeah, that's the point. There are no sides to war, it's all just violence. While others say, okay, sure, but that doesn't mean it's a successful movie, then that it's cowardly, or it just becomes a big spectacle with nothing interesting to say. That's kind of a similar situation here. I have kind of landed on, I think a lot of this movie is very compelling and apt, but a lot of it does feel like it's just a lot of noise with little substance to back it. It's kind of one of those movies that because it's taking real life events that we know very well, it seems like it has a lot of substance to it, but I don't actually know if that's the case. I fully believe that I don't think Ari Aster is trying to poke fun at left-leaning people or right-leaning people. I think it's genuinely just trying to say, look how fucked up we are. But to that, I say like, okay, don't we know this already? And at 2.5 hours long, the metaphor just kind of started to drag, much like how the year 2020 felt. So again, it can all be purposeful, but that doesn't mean it's successful, if that makes sense. Look, I hate doing this review literally the morning after I saw it, because I do want a little more time to digest my thoughts. I haven't read anyone else's pieces on this movie either. I would like to. And I know there are people much smarter than me who have different takes on this movie, some who love it way more than me and some who hate it. I'm just trying to tell you what my gut reaction is to this movie, which if I can sum up, I do think for better and certainly for worse, this is probably the definitive COVID movie that we've had so far. There are moments that feel so spot on with how it felt like to live in 2020, and there are other moments that just felt like chaos and annoyance on screen. But again, there was something that did compel me to see where this was going. And in all honesty, it did certainly capture how awful it felt to be living in 2020. Eddington, 3 stars. Let me know in the comments what you think about this movie when you see it, and let's try to be civil here. What is Ari Aster gonna do next? Where does he go from here?